Everyone is talking about the great September to December lock-in. These last 4 months of 2025, people are really going to change up their whole routine. And whether it be through the gym, through their finances, they're trying to become the successful person that they've always perceived themselves to be. And I believe, the winter months and the autumn months are the perfect time of the year because you're not going to be wanting to go outside and spend time drinking outside because it's cold. You want to stay inside of the places that you live in, the gym, and really get to work on what you really need to get done because we're all tired of living in complacency and living an average life. We're done. Okay, we're done. We need to see a change in our lives. And, that's good. That is a positive change. But I wanted to talk about the number one mistake that people may make because, it is tempting to do this one mistake. And I will give it to you right now. But first, if you guys like these kind of content videos, I talk about travel a lot. So I'm going to be talking about my trip to Germany because I talked about this concept of, this year it's called the Great September to December Lock-In. Last year it was known as the Winter Arc, and I actually talked about the Winter Arc when I was in Germany in October, and I made a whole video about it. I never actually uploaded it, but I think this is the best opportunity that I could get to actually, put that video out there by, reacting to it a little bit and, seeing where my mindset was because when I traveled, I loved this idea of, grinding, being in grind mode. Because when you see that kind of success in your life, travel is like, a light form of that success, very temporary for what I was doing. Because, I had to come back home and then, realize, I need to make this change if I want this kind of change to be permanent. But the number one mistake that I just want people to let this sink in when I tell you this. The people in your life, if you really want to see them in your future, it's a big risk in actually telling people what you're doing. You don't want to tell anyone that you're grinding, that you're trying to, achieve this big success, achieve your dreams. This lock-in, this moment of locking in, this grind is a thankless job. You got to get that in your head. It's a thankless job. And I know it's kind of hard when you got people in your life that, you plan on completely changing their life through your change, but you're not exactly seeing the physical results of it. So you want to just, tell them what you're doing. You want to lay down all the plans that you're doing, step by step, let people know that this is what you're doing. You're locking in. You want to tell people this. But you got to understand that not a lot of people are going to be receptive to what you tell them, okay? There's a lot of people that are okay with being average and mediocre and complacent in their life. And, there's a lot of complainers who just complain to complain. It makes them feel better about complaining because, it justifies their own, inability to grind the same way that you do. And part of that can be demoralizing, okay? And if you really want to stick to this journey of grinding, the last thing you need is someone demoralizing your motivation. The worst thing is to be on a roll, you feel like you're making these successes, you're making these changes in your life, and then someone just throws a wrench in that progress that completely throws you off and, makes you stop, uploading videos on YouTube like I did through the summer because, I really got into my own head and I let someone's thoughts get into my head to make me feel like, maybe I am not really doing what I need to do in life. I've been making YouTube videos for 2 years and, I got 70 subscribers, but most people, they probably would have, completely quit YouTube after, that little amount of, subscribers. They would have expected they'd have like thousands by now. But that's not always the way. That's not always how life goes. Okay, you're not gonna achieve the success, the physical form of success that people always see when they imagine success. When you imagine success, what do you picture? a person with a lot of money, a lot of followers, high status. And nowadays, that is cool to see still, for, the regular person. But I think the people that are the real grinders and the real people who are putting the work in, we understand that you're not always going to see the success that you make in life. People don't see what you do behind the scenes all the time for you to achieve success. Okay, it's the invisible things that people will not appreciate you for when you're on the success journey. And when you tell people about that, they're not going to see the things that you see. Okay, because they've gotten so used to complacency and an average lifestyle that they will not realize that the things that you're doing are the real steps that you need to make to achieve success. Okay, and when you try to get people on your routine and on your on your journey, they're not always going to be receptive to that. Okay, and there's like a saying in the Bible, you can lead a sheep to water, but you can't make them drink it. That it's just that you may be able to show them the steps of everything that you're doing, and if you want them to do the same, you can't always expect them to understand that. Okay, and also we're getting biblical here, but don't throw pearls to swine, don't throw pearls to pigs. I have to keep this in mind when I make videos like this and they don't get a lot of views, because I know that the information that I put in these videos is so valuable that if people aren't receptive to what I say in these videos, I understand that wasn't for those people. I threw the pearls, not, I'm not calling the people that watch my, or don't watch my videos, in the same context of there, but, that makes me feel all right with, the success that I've made in my journey on YouTube, because YouTube isn't the only thing that I've been doing in my grind and success journey. Okay, this is just like a document of the things that I do. The trials that I make, because maybe in 10 and 20 years, when I want my kids to see what I did in my life, because this is the new documentation. YouTube videos and things like that. That's the new documentation of journaling, like Lewis and Clark. Okay, this is the modern day version of that. And I could just store it on my computer, but storage costs a lot of money. So YouTube is a good way of doing that. But I believe that when we are grateful for what little successes that we make in our life, that it multiplies through that appreciation. That's literally why they call it appreciation. It doesn't just go for houses that appreciate or depreciate. Houses don't usually depreciate, but cars depreciate. Same thing goes for anything else that you do in life that you appreciate. What you want growing in your life will continue to grow when you appreciate it. And and that's also another story in the Bible where, I'm not too religious on this channel all the time, but, there's stories in the Bible that, ring true these days, which is very interesting. But, the story where Jesus had, the bread, he had 5 loaves of bread and the 2 fishes, and then he showed gratitude for what little he had, and then he fed all the villages of people. It's sort of like that. Let's pull up this video that, it's my trip to Germany was in October, and I was talking about the winter arc when I got back from Germany. So yeah, let's see what I actually say here. Just taking one last walk through the city of Germany, Frankfurt. And tomorrow I'll be back home. It's funny when I think about before I came on this trip, I didn't want to go. I thought coming here was going to be a big mistake. I was getting cold feet, and that always happens to me before I take a big trip somewhere. And now my last night here, I don't even want to leave. This place feels like a second home already. 3 weeks, and now I love this place. But when I get back home, I'm going to be on my winter arc. Everyone's going to be on their winter arc. Um, it's like the big trend that's happening. People going on their winter arc, people going on their winter arc, and they're going to get serious about their life and start, locking in. Um, and it's perfect timing for me. I didn't know there was such thing as a winter arc, but my whole plan here was after I go on any international trip, I get invigorated to start locking in and doing some serious work to fix up my life and get where I want to be in life. So, what is a winter arc anyway? I left America to go to I left America to go to Germany. Here's why. I needed to get to my winter arc stage. Now, some of you might be wondering what a winter arc is. It's basically when you just start taking your life seriously. All your life you've been fooling around, and now the season has come to the time where you have to start dealing with what you have to deal with to get where you want to be in life. So, yeah, as you can see, that mindset that I had back then still rings true today. Okay, it's just, repeating itself. And by the end of this year, a lot of people make these, New Year's resolutions. By the start of 2026, people are probably planning, that's when they're going to start making that change in their life where they want to be. I would suggest starting already now. So by the time you get to where you're creating these New Year's resolutions, you're already on that roll, and a lot of people fall off. I made, many videos of this, in the beginning of this year, talking about how people make these resolutions and they don't stick to that plan. This is the great opportunity, the great lock-in, where people can just lock in and actually seize those opportunities, before the New Year's starts, because, a lot of people don't take those resolutions too seriously. So I made that video in the beginning of the year. Halfway through the year, I was getting people questioning them, what have they done to actually, seek these opportunities, make that change in their life, because, everyone said that in 2025 they were going to make that change in their life to actually get successful, whether it be through the gym, through the finances, all of the great success indicators that people talk about. But if you haven't made that leap yet, the September to December lock-in, 4 months, 4 months, summer's over. You don't have to deal with, making plans with friends anymore because they don't even want to be outside. So what are you guys going to do today? What are you going to do to actually make that change? And, I've been dealing with a lot of, very important, business things that I haven't been showing you guys recently because, a lot of planning, it's not a beautiful sight. Not everything you can just post on social media so people could see what you're doing. I see friends getting married, having weddings, all my colleagues in colleges, they're getting married. It's a beautiful sight, perfect for social media. But the things that involve grinding, getting where you need to be, you can't always post that. And that's why, it may feel like, you're not getting that validation. No one's seeing your status. No one's seeing the gains that you're making in the gym. And it's thankless. It's demotivating. But if you're grinding, if you're watching this right now, I need you to know. If you're grinding, if you're doing what you need to do, if you have confidence in what you're doing, then you're making the changes that you need to be. And then eventually, when you get to where you need to be, then you can start showing all the glitz and glam that, the fruits of your labor. But yeah, I think that's all I had to say. Let me know in the comments, what you think of the September to December lock-in. Are you guys taking part? Are you in the same mindset as me where you can't tell anyone, Let me know. because I feel like a lot of people watching this video are pretty much in the same mindset as me. But yeah, I think that's it. I know I haven't posted videos in a while. I'll get back on that. I needed the right, mindset, and I'm back into my grind mode. Yeah, and I'll see you guys later. And yeah, stay tuned. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and leave a like if you like content like this. And I'll see you guys later. Peace.